everyone loves a good old woke entitled brats getting what's coming to them story, this has been one that's been brewing since last spring, so almost a year and a half to get justice. But 80 students who are all paying $80,000+ a year to attend Columbia, a woke Ivy League school, have all been suspended for several years. Some people having their diplomas revoked and more for their parts in essentially occupying buildings and causing property damage and so much more. Many of them absolutely having meltdowns after getting the first taste of consequences in their life, crying, demanding to be let back in. And on top of that, the college itself got ruthlessly brought to heel by Donald Trump and being forced to pay over $200 million for fomenting these demonstrations that any normal person would call a riot. Now, look, I think that these type of laws / rules / whatever, if these kids want to protest against Israel, they should be allowed to. They should be allowed to protest against any nation they want, including America. Once they start breaking into buildings, once they start sending security guards to the hospital because they're, getting injured, then I don't care what happens to them. I'm concerned the way our government is approaching anti-Semitism and the penalties that it's levying around criticizing a single nation over any other nation. You should be allowed free speech. If everyone who is suspended here was a rioter, then I'm fine with that. On top of that, we're going to talk about the Columbia University having to pay over $200 million in a settlement to Donald Trump over this, and why this is actually a huge win, because it's not just about anti-Semitism. There are now big bans on stuff that I greatly agree with. Columbia finally expels 80 students for participating in the protest. Universities say such violations will no longer be tolerated. Columbia University has taken strong action against students who joined protests against Israel's war in Gaza. The school has expelled some students, suspended others, and even revoked entire academic degrees. Now, I don't know how much that matters, how much, you're going to say you went to Columbia and that you graduated. Are they going to call up Columbia and see if you really did and if it's been revoked? I don't know. Others are suspended for as many as 3 years. CUAD has been calling on Columbia to cut all financial ties with Israel, according to an Al Jazeera report. In a statement on Tuesday, Columbia said that the latest punishments were related to the protests at Butler Library in May last year and an encampment during the alumni weekend, spring of 2024, actually May this year, and then alumni weekend last year, 2 years ago. The university said disruptions to academic activities are in violation of university policies and rules, and such violations will necessarily generate consequences. The thing is, if you're protesting, fine, I don't care. I don't have to agree with your cause, I don't have to disagree with your cause, but you're not allowed to stop the 99.5% of other students there who are paying $80,000 a year from getting to class, which is something that they did. You're not allowed to take over buildings, which is something that they did. You're not allowed to hold hostages, which is something that they did. This is a group of students that have never faced any real consequences in their entire lives. And I absolutely love that the first real consequences that they're facing could be completely destroying their academic careers. Now, many of them will be rich kids who will bounce back from this, but not everyone will. Many of them will be, H-1Bs that are going to have to leave the country. Despite that, student protests took over a library again in the final exams, during final exams in May. They called for the university to stop investing in companies tied to the Israeli military and showed support for Palestinians in Gaza. Again, they're fine to do that. They're just not fine to, take over buildings. Board said expulsions, suspensions, and revoked degrees were handed out for disrupting campus during that time. The university didn't say how many were expelled, but said that that was the final set of findings from just that period. Columbia is also trying to get back $400 million in federal funding. The Trump administration cut the funds, saying that the university did not do enough to protect Jewish students from harassment. Again, I just think let's talk about harassment, not Jewish students and harassment. Like if you're harassing students, male students for being male, or, you know, whatever the case may be, if you're getting federal funds, then you have to live by a different standard than most other schools. Claire Shipman, Columbia's acting president, remember the other president was fired, and former trustee, was booed by students during the May graduation ceremony because of her role in punishing the pro-Palestine protests. Meanwhile, Harvard University, which also faced threats of funding cuts, has taken the Trump administration to court over it. The disciplinary actions at Columbia came the same day reports from Gaza said, I don't care about that. Again, I don't have a problem with students protesting for, against whatever they want to, as long as they're doing it on their own time, on their own, and they're not impeding other students from getting to class. They're not taking over buildings. These seem like pretty simple core tenets of free speech, like pretty simple things. Even a normal person wouldn't sneeze at that. This article here now about the $220 million payout. Again, I'm curious where this money's going. Like we keep hearing about how much money Trump's taking in from tariffs. Like, when is that going to reduce my taxes? This $220 million that the government took for anti-Semitism, where's that going? Like, how about you write everybody a check for $25 in America, or you give us all a nice write-off on our taxes next year or something like that. Here are some of the most significant concessions. They have been completely brought to heel because ultimately the reason they're doing this is not the money. The reason they're doing this is because enrollment has cratered almost certainly. Remember Evergreen College, where it was $80,000 a year? It didn't matter. The thing is, $80,000 a year. The students, 5 students took over the school president's office or something like that. Enrollment cratered. Mizzou, during the BLM riots, had that crazy teacher who was using these idiot students as useful idiots. They had to close entire dormitories because attendance had dropped so much. The bottom line is parents don't want to send their kids to these schools that are basically communist factories. Independent review will now end discrimination in their admissions and hiring process. This is not just against Jewish people. This is against white men too. Ban on masked protests. I'm fine with that. Disciplinary actions will now be administered by Office of the Provost versus the Faculty Senate. They announced serious punishments for those who have participated in the Butler Library riots, which we talked about, and required to report any disciplinary action against students attending who are on student visas. This is absolutely great. The $200 million is about their discrimination in general. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. This is a massive win. The Trump administration has won an unprecedented concessions from Columbia University in a sweeping settlement. The Ivy League school paying more than $220 million, pledging to reverse racially discriminatory practices and resolve civil rights violations against Jewish students and workers, the Post can exclusively reveal. The settlement, under which Columbia will now agree to submit to independent monitoring to ensure it's complying with merit-based hiring only and admissions requirements, is likely to put pressure on other schools like Harvard University that have crossed the White House over tolerance of extreme Jew hatred on campus. Again, I don't care about what people's personal beliefs. You keep your hands off people. You allow them to move around unimpeded. That's your right. This is about, as you see in the video, these students breaking into buildings, barricading themselves in, and holding people hostage. Okay. The settlement under which Columbia agrees. Now, the resolution comes just 4 months after 4 months of negotiation between Columbia and Trump, striking a stark contrast with Harvard, who decided to drag the administration into court for stripping the school of $2.6 billion in grants. Look, those grants are not guaranteed. And if you're going to have people wearing face diapers and keffiyehs breaking into buildings and you're going to tolerate that, then I'm 100% fine with you losing all of your federal funding. If you're a private university and you want to say, hey, we allow this on our campus, that's your right. But when you're getting my tax dollars, that's just a completely different argument. You have to abide by the First Amendment, and you have to protect other people's rights on the campus too. These people are certainly allowed to protest against Israel all they want. They can wear the anti-Israel shirts. They can do all that kind of stuff. But they cannot be disrupting class. They cannot be breaking into buildings. They cannot be impeding the movement of other students who just want to go to class, of which they've paid $80,000 plus a year for. These are, they agree to a ban. We talked about that. They're also sharing relevant data on foreign applicants with the U.S. government. This means that almost certainly Harvard will bend the knee too. And by the way, they should. If they want to have these bizarre, different rules for their schools, then that's fine. Then you just don't get federal dollars. I mean, is it that complicated to understand? I just don't, I don't have any really care for them. You're going to let these kids cover their faces and break into buildings, then you don't get my tax dollars. This is another common sense win for the Trump administration. And I suspect Harvard and other schools will be following suit, because now there's precedent for it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it. If you haven't yet, subscribe or follow down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.